Organon, and we all are in that profession. So I think that I want to learn from you also, and whatever I know, I want to share it with you. So it is going to be an interactive process. Now, to begin with, I was given this topic of history of medicine, and Dr. Viru told me that many of the resource persons feel this topic to be, it's just names and dates, so it's not very interesting. And to be very honest, in my entire career, I always start with aphorism 1. I don't take the introductory part of Organon. Those who are my students, they must be knowing. And being the boss, what I do is, being the HOD, I give it to other teachers to teach the introductory part, and I start from aphorism 1. So I'm always ardent follower of Organon, the aphorisms, Dr. Hahnemann. So because Dr. Viru told me to take this topic, I've taken this topic. So first of all, I would like to know from you all also that as teachers of Organon, how many of you have taught this topic? You have taught it, okay. So ma'am, can you share your method of teaching? How do you teach this topic?
Being an introductory part, I think that history of medicine is very essential because we should know that what was the scenario in the ancient and how we have launched now. And whenever, if it is a quote written by Herodotus that if you don't know your history, you cannot create a history.
History, yeah.
So my method of teaching is just starting from the primitive era to the recent 17th century, 18th century medicine. So it
is how you teach.
Very interesting topic, and then our students enjoy it.
Yes, it is interesting. That is what I felt while preparing for this CAB. I felt that I was omitting this topic was not good. I should have taken it. Anyone else want to share? Yes, ma'am.
It is also somewhat. I was also feeling bored first of all, but I thought that we should make effort. Why we cannot understand. First I understood and then explained my student, and I was explaining in the PPT form, the images and all that. And as madam told, starting from the primitive era. And during my MD, actually madam, I have done MD in repertory subject, but Organon was my favorite subject. So during PG, one book was there, and our sir told that you just study for the PG level. So that in that history of medicine is given very nicely. In every century, the correlation with the homeopathic, it is given.
Which book?
SP Deni book આવે છે madam. In the PG, I am having Xerox copy. Yeah. Original also we did not get.
Yes.
It's very nice book. The first book I have seen.
If you go to Park, the community medicine book, there also many of the ages are described. And if we go to introduction, which is written by Dr. Hahnemann himself, he also has covered so many different methods of treatment and so many different ages in which how the growth of medicine took place. So it's not only our books of homeopathy, but in allied subjects is also you find the reference of the history of medicine. Anyone else? Any inputs? Yes, sir.
Dr. A.T. Jagos has written a nice book, The Homeopathic World, where he has given in a nice concise form, so that the student is able to retain what is the most essential thing. Because there are books, but they are like in the Xerox form. Anita Chawla is one which we were referring during our PG in Karnataka. It was done by a student from A.M. Sheikh College. But Dr. A.T. Jagos' book, I feel, is the best for the students to retain what to be written for exam.
Yes, it was in the syllabus of PG. The history of medicine, and for that Dr. Jagos has written this book. In one of our CMEs in Organon, which had taken place at my college, Dr. Jagos had come as a participant, and at that time he explained the entire concept. At that time he was about to publish this book, and he had discussed the entire construction with it. And what he has done is that he has precisely given emphasis to the students. Like the students can understand this too. And Ayurveda, he has described in complete detail. Dr. Jagosh's book, if you see, Ayurveda, he has, means all the Indian medicines, Unani, Ayurveda, he has described in complete details. Like everything what is related to Ayurveda, he has covered it. So it's a very good book, especially to refer to your students also. And we were fortunate enough to have him for 6 days at our
Indian
college.
pioneers also he has mentioned.
Yeah, all homeopathic pioneers. In the same book, he has mentioned all the homeopathic stalwarts. He has described them, how they came to homeopathy and what contribution they have done for homeopathy. So that part is also covered by Dr. Jagosh. Okay, so as everyone said, that we can know our present if we know our past. This is how we learn. Now see, as I told that I believe I teach Organon more, and so I have taken this stanza from the very first edition of Organon, which was published in 1810. And by writing this stanza on the very first page of the first edition of Organon, the truth we mortals need, us blessed to make and keep, the all-wise slightly covered over, but did not bury deep. Now see, this was the stanza which was taken from a poet, Gellert or Gilbert. Some books say it is Gilbert, some say it is Gellert. And this stanza was taken by Dr. Hahnemann. And he had written it on the very first page of the first edition of his Bible of Homeopathy. I always feel that this one stanza, this one paragraph, explains so many things that if you see as a viewpoint of Dr. Hahnemann, it shows his humble personality. He is giving all credit to nature, to the all-wise. He is not taking the credit. Because here he has written the truth. We mortals, mortals means we human beings who are going to die. Gods are immortal, we are mortal. So, the truth means the things which are necessary for us, which are beneficial for us make us blessed to make and keep, which are like a blessing to us, which will make us and which will maintain us, which will prolong our life, which will help to maintain our health. Now all these things which are necessary, nature or the all-wise. All-wise means one who knows everything. For God we say Almighty. All-wise means He knows everything. So the all-wise has put it within our reach. All what is beneficial for mankind. You say food, you say water, you say air, or you say law of similia. Everything what is beneficial, which is like a blessing, which is helpful to us, which will help us to maintain our health, is just within our reach. We put a little efforts and we can gain it. See, this is what he wanted to convey, that he had found the law of similia. He had not invented, he had found it. And he had used it. It was not we cannot say it was finding also, because before him also people had used it and mentioned it. But here what he is saying, that this, what is necessary for us, is just within our reach. It is that God has not buried it deep. It is just within our reach. We have to put a little efforts and we can get it. Now this is what he wanted to convey. So same thing, and see, this shows that he was a humble person. Then, as you know, the famous story. Sir, if you can just silent your phone, so you can go out and you
Yes,
can,
yes.
because now see, this same thing, that afterwards, you know, that after the publication of the first edition of Organon, there was a storm of criticism against Dr. Hahnemann. He was severely criticized. There were some monthly journals which were published just to criticize him. Different words were used to criticize him. This just reminds me, we are going just a bit off the track, but I want to give credit to a one of the stalwart of India. You must have heard the name of Dr. Mahendra Singh. Yeah, right now his son, Dr. Subhash Singh, is the director of NIH. Now, Dr. Mahendra Singh had once come to our college. I was very young at that time, recently joined the college. And he had come for an inauguration function at our college, and I was like after him asking questions related to Organon. And then he was kind enough, after he went from our college to Kolkata, he forgot my name because I was a very junior teacher at that time. He just forgot my name, but he sent me the material. Just writing the young teacher of Organon on the address he had written to the young teacher of Organon department, and then he had written our college address. And he sent me all the material, wherein after the publication of first edition of Organon, how Dr. Hahnemann was criticized. The original writings in Germany and then translated in German language and translated into English. I still have that material with me. So this is that he was called a scoundrel, he was called a dog, he was called a quack. Now you can see those words in that material, the literature which Dr. Mahendra Singh had sent. Now this is what had happened after the first edition of Organon, and then Hahnemann removed this stanza, and instead of that he wrote Instead of that he wrote Audiusaper. Dare to be wise. See, then he was no more humble. He did not give the credit to nature or to God. He said, I am wiser than all of you. I know more than you, all of you. I am cleverer, and I have got the courage to remain wise. Dare to be wise. And he, in a very, very subtle way, he gave a message that no matter whatever happens, I am going to continue with my work on homeopathy. And that is why I have got the daring, I have got the strength, I have got the courage. And this is about our first edition and second edition of Organon. But see, the same applies to the history of medicine also. That all which was beneficial, all different ways of methods of treatment, from the medicines from the plant kingdom, mineral kingdom, animal kingdom, all was available. Some pioneers came in the history, some people who were thinking ahead of their time, These were the pioneers, these were the people who took medicine forward. And from their mistakes, people in the next generation learned, and that's how this history of medicine is of two things. Exactly, it is of two things. One is the pioneers or the stalwarts who were thinking ahead of their time. It is the contribution of their intelligence. And secondly, it is the mistakes which were committed by some people, the misconceptions which were committed by some people in the field of medicine, from which we have learned. So this is how medicine has progressed. This is how, if you go through the entire history of medicine, this is what has happened. And as I have written, the past supplies the key to the present and future. And evolution of medicine is the evolution of mankind and human knowledge. That is what I told, that there were people, if you come across, as we go across, you will come to know that there were so many people who thought ahead of their time. And their contribution has given the medicine what right now we are enjoying. Okay, so this is the reasoning is an attribute of humankind. Reasoning helps in differentiating the right against the wrong and helps us to reach to the truth. See again the word truth. This is the word which this will reasoning. See, when I am saying reasoning, it takes you again to Organon, that is logic. Right? Reasoning is logic. You reason. Now reasoning means just not asking questions, but finding out answers which satisfies the curiosity or the intelligence of one and all. That is logic, or that is reasoning. Right? Reasoning means or logic or drawing inferences. It is drawing inferences. Just asking questions is not enough. Why the water boils? Why the sun is not seen, why the shadow of the earth is on the sun or the moon. See, these are just asking questions. But then there were people who found out an answer which satisfies the intelligence of one and all. And that is what Dr. Hahnemann said, rational. See, in the title of Organon, he used the word rational art of healing. And that is what is rational, which is not just man-made or theories which have not got any experimental verification. That is irrational. When there is an experimental verification, then it becomes rational. Now this is the reasoning. If we see homeopathy, if we see Organon, as teachers of Organon, you must be knowing, and will come across Lord Francis Bacon also, in the history of medicine also. Hahnemann was very much impressed by Bacon, and therefore he adopted the word Organon from Novum Organon, which was written by Lord Bacon. And when he wrote his Bible of homeopathy, he took it as Organon of medicine. So he had taken that word, and he had followed the method of inductive logic, which was introduced by Lord Bacon. If we go back from the history of medicine to our history of homeopathy, the entire, we are asking questions also, how homeopathy is based upon the inductive and deductive logic. That is a question which is asked in the exams. Now, if we go back, then this reasoning or this logic is the foundation or the fundamental of homeopathy also. We are not going in the details of inductive logic, but as you all know, that for reasoning or for logic or inductive logic, Lord Bacon, who was not a doctor, who was not a person from the medical field, he was just a philosopher, an English philosopher. And he said that there are 4 steps of logic, to practice logic or to find out the truth, or in the words nomenclature of logic, to find out the premise. Premise means the fact or the truth. So here what he said, correct observation of the facts and phenomena, right? The first one, correct observation. I am just trying to explain what is reasoning, and this is the base of evolution of medicine. So what happened was, in the evolution of medicine, the people who observed correctly, correct observation. Hahnemann went a step ahead. It's just not observation. He said you have to perceive. In the 3rd aphorism he has written, the physician has to perceive. So with your all 5 senses, you see, you look, you observe, you hear, you touch, you feel it, that is perceived. The perception will create a conception. Right? When you observe. Observe means you see with a purpose. That is observation. You see with a purpose. This observation, when you can perceive, you perceive it, and then a conception will be formed. A concept of, or an idea or a story will be formed in it. So only observation, Hahnemann went a step ahead. It is not only observation. But the second step of Lord Bacon, correct observation and accurate perception. Accurate perception or understanding of whatever you have seen. Not only observation, but you understand it, perceive accurately. Because observation, when you don't understand correctly, may go wrong. See, you'll find correlation of everything, all these steps of science in Organon. Hahnemann wrote the 6th aphorism. Unprejudiced observer. I always tell the students that among all the aphorisms of Organon, this is the most difficult to be practiced. And honestly speaking, after years of homeopathic practice, very few are unprejudiced. We have got a preconceived theory or a favorite theory in our mind that the patient is coming, we are going to find out the Maya only. We are going to see the concomitants only. We are going to see the constant, yeah, he is entering, he is tall, thin, stooped shoulder, narrow chest, phosphorus. We want him to become phosphorus. And that is why Hahnemann has written that you don't ask direct questions, you don't ask leading questions. But then if you see the practice, there are very few who are doing this. I tell the students always that in your case taking, when I am taking clinics or the PG students, that in your case taking, if you speak more than your patient, then your case taking is absolutely going wrong. You are going to form a wrong totality of symptoms. So when you speak more and the patient is speaking less, your totality of symptoms is going to be wrong, be sure of it. So this is that you perceive correct observation, correct interpretation of the facts which you have observed. Second step of inductive logic, or of case taking, or of drug doing. See, we can correct. Hahnemann had so strongly followed the principles of science. If you go across, when you learn science, when you learn medicine, you find that everywhere this man had taken care that it is not a man-made theory, it is not something which is coming out of the pockets of the followers of Hahnemann, but it is something which is scientific. So first is correct observation, then it is correct, accurate interpretation of the facts which you have observed, and then you give a rational explanation. See, again the word comes rational, which Hahnemann had used liberally. Means you are able to explain what you have observed and understood. But it should be rational, means it should be satisfying the intelligence of one and all. It should not be irrational. And then finally, whatever you have observed correctly, whatever you have understood, you have explained, can be verified with the help of experimentation. These are the 4 steps of inductive logic, right, which were described in the home already. Hahnemann adopted it when the famous experiment of cinchona bark for Marshall, which happened with Dr. Hahnemann. He took the juice of cinchona bark, the symptoms like that of Marshall were produced in him. When he stopped taking the juice, the symptoms disappeared. This was one observation. He did it 50 times, right? From 1790 to 1796, he did it 50 times, almost 50 times. And every time he observed the same thing. Then he interpreted that a medicine cures a symptom or a disease because it produces it. So that was the interpretation. And then he gave an explanation that if you want to cure a symptom, find out a medicine which can produce it. Law of similia, similia similibus curator. And then, whenever you give a similibum cure takes place, that is an experimental verification. So this was the foundation of homeopathy. Same thing happens in case taking. That you observe, you understand, you perceive it, you form the totality of symptoms, you give a similibum on that totality of symptoms, and cure takes place. So everywhere you find the reasoning is continuous in homeopathy, it was continuous in the growth of medicine also. So this is what is reasoning. And see, man is the only creature who is gifted with this sense of right and wrong. We are the only ones who differentiate between the right and the wrong. Maybe if it was students, I would have told them, but we choose always the wrong. But we are gifted with this, that what is right and what is wrong. So reasoning helps us to find out the truth, the premise, the fact, what is right. And the development of science and medicine is never static, but always evolving with human development. Now, this is self-explanatory. That still today also, science is growing, science is developing. If we read the introductory part of Organon, how in the 17th century, before the 17th century, Hanuman has described what was the scenario. So science is always growing, it is never static. Even today we are growing, and every day new inventions, new things are coming. Now the latest AI, which is latest one, that we are growing in this form also. So this is it. Now the different ages of medicine, as you know, the primitive age, which is known as the demonic, these people were believing in demons, they were believing in ghosts and everything. Please. I'm extremely sorry, I forgot to put it on the silent mode. Okay, so these are the ages of medicine. Primitive medicine, that is demonic. Middle age is known as the dark age. Renaissance period is the Reformation. 17th century of medicine, which was known as the century of geniuses. The 18th century of medicine was the ages of theories, complex theories. 19th century of medicine, scientific medicine started, and 20th century of medicine was modern medicine. So these are the different ages. We'll try to cover all the ages as well as the different civilizations of how they had practiced medicine. Now see, we begin, as ma'am said, that we begin with the primitive age so that we can know about the present. So we start with the primitive age. Now, that time, even in Organon, we find the reference of this, and we find it in the books of, as I told, community medicine also, that there were supernatural theories of diseases. Now, supernatural, see, man, when he fails to understand something, then he always, it is our tendency to contribute it to supernatural powers. When we don't understand anything, then we contribute it to the supernatural powers. If we go to the very back, the eclipse, man was not able to understand eclipse, solar eclipse. So what they said कि राहु और केतु सूर्य को निगल जाते हैं, right? So this is how, when we don't understand things, then we start believing in supernatural powers. That ये नदी में पानी सफेद हो जाता है, तो गंगा जी आती है. See, all those, every place has got some theories like this, and that is because our human psyche, that we are contributing to these supernatural theories. Now, in that age, man failed to understand disease and death. And so what they said, that they went to the church for explanation, to the priest, to the religion. Now the priests were the head of the societies. They were looking after the health of the people also, as well as the morality of the society also. Now, according to their understanding, they gave 3 reasons for diseases and death. First thing was, which even today it is prevailing, that you have sinned, you have done something wrong, and therefore the gods are offended, and so you are punished. That is the first thing, which even today people believe. Even for leprosy, the necrosis of the fingers and nails and everything takes place. That person was a thief. He must have stolen something, and therefore his hands are getting decayed. So this was the concept, that always, and so the church or the priest decided that what is the treatment? See, the cause was wrong, so the treatment was wrong. So what is the treatment? That he has to repent. Repentance. Because you have sinned, you have to repent. Means you have to fast for so many days, or you have to give this much gold to the church, or गाय देना है, गाय देने से सब पाप दूर हो जाएंगे. See, all those things. So when the cause was wrong, the method of treatment was also wrong. The second one was that the body is possessed by an evil spirit. Right? Evil spirit. Some evil some Atma has come, the soul has come, wrong soul has possessed your body, and so you are suffering. See, this was again a misconception. Recently, I am not talking about long back, recently just before 6-7 months, a patient of toxemia of pregnancy. She was 8 months pregnant. She was having convulsions. And for convulsions, see, you know that if there is epileptic convulsions or convulsions, locked jaw, and even if 2-3 people are trying to catch that patient or means trying to see that the patient lies down, they are not able to do it. Now, this patient of toxemia of pregnancy, they were from, I think so, they were from UP, and they were in Ahmedabad. And the health workers, they regularly went seen, and the corporation has started this, that people, the health worker goes to everyone's house in the slum area, and they bring them to the maternity, corporation maternity home for checkup, and they give them medicines also, iron, and sometimes milk also. Now this is the practice, they go from door to door if the patient is not coming. Now they went on asking the patient to come to the hospital. The people said, this is the first pregnancy and hamare means family men, this is not allowed. They can't go to the hospital. And then this lady, poor lady, had toxemia of pregnancy. She was having epileptic convulsions were there. And then they said that she is possessed by some spirit. इसलिए इतने सारे लोग उसको दबा के ऐसे पकड़ते हैं, फिर भी वो बेड में ऐसे उछलती है और उसका मुंह बंद हो जाता है जिसका. So they called that witch doctor Hua then. So they called that witch doctor, and he started beating this lady. He used to come once or twice in a week, and he used to beat this lady. Finally, she died. And the doctor who was in charge of that area, maternity home, I knew that doctor, she sued these people. And so the whole matter came in the newspapers. Now this is, I'm talking about 7-8 months back. It came in the newspapers and so. So see, still people believe in this possession by an evil spirit. Still people are believing. Tuberculosis patient who is wasting, losing weight, somebody is there in the body. Sab khana khata hai. So these concepts are there. Even if you go in India, if you go out on the 4 roads, you see things lying over there. So it is all those witchcrafts. And the third reason was that somebody is doing some ill craft or witchcraft upon that person. Koi jadoo to na kar raha hai. And therefore the disease is not going, therefore the man is sick. Now these were the supernatural theories which were prevailing in the primitive ages or before that also. And in the beginning, very beginning, that is in the the Stone Age, the Paleolithic man, he was known as the cavemen. They were hunters. And they hunted and they ate food, and they were totally ignorant about all diseases. Gradually, man started evolving. And in the Neolithic age, that is the New Stone Age, he started, the biggest invention in that age was the wheel. The wheel was invented. And because the wheel was invented, he started doing harvesting. He started growing crops. So from a hunter, he gradually was converting into a farmer. When he was gradually converting into farmer, he started making things which can be used for farming to get food. And in that, he started making small instruments also to remove a throne or to do a plaster. He started making unknowingly primitive surgical instruments. Now this was from the Stone Age when evolution took place and when harvesting started. Crops, they started growing the crops. Unknowingly, they started making small surgical crude instruments for using it for different types of diseases, different types of injuries. And among them, one of the methods which they found out was trepanning, that is skull. That is one of the methods which they found out, especially for epilepsy, for migraine, for such diseases, convulsions. They found out such methods. Even for fever, they were using it. And so this was the beginning of the use of surgical instruments and for the use of some of the herbs which they started growing. Shoe flower and such flowers which they started growing for digestive disturbances. They started making the broth of these herbs and they started drinking it. So this was the beginning for fever, for digestive complaints, then for some minor injuries. They started finding out the treatment. So this was the beginning. These are the some of this. This is a picture of treatment, and you can find pictures where they have made holes in the entire skull. So depending upon the severity of the disease, they were making these holes, and they had used this craft, and it is believed that many people died also doing this while drawing these holes. These are some of the pictures where they tried to set a fracture, but they were not able to do it properly. But they started using the logs and the wood to make the fractures. These are some of the flowers which they were using for drinking, for digestive complaints and for fevers. And at some places I have seen pictures where they had put the wood in the nose, like they had pierced the nose, and for cough, cold, tuberculosis, they were piercing the nose and they were putting a little wood, a stick in the nose. So these were the primitive methods of treatment. Now the Middle Age, from the primitive age we come to the Middle Age. The period between 500 to 1500 AD is known as the Middle Age. During this age, with the fall of the Roman Empire, the Roman medicine also deteriorated. When we come to the Roman civilization, you will see how the Roman civilization had flourished in medicine. But later on, when the Roman kings were defeated, then along with the Roman kings, the Roman medicine also came to a downfall. And Europe was ravaged by diseases, and it was known as the Dark Age of Medicine. Europe became very, very poor in health, and so it was known as the Dark Age of Medicine. This time was the era of the Arabian Renaissance, as they translated Greco-Roman medicine literature into Arabic. Thus, Unani system of medicine flourished. See, in the Middle Age, the European system of medicine had flourished before that. But then the fall of the Roman emperors brought a standstill to the European medicine. It is said that during that time, some of the physicians from Europe came to India also. And at that time in India, Charak was at the peak. And so they took the literature and the learnings and the writings of Charak back to Europe also. So they were in a very poor state, and so they were traveling all over the world to find out something. And at that time, the people of Arabia, they started taking the medical knowledge of Rome as well as Greece. And some came to India also, the Hakims, and they started, and this is the period when Rome fell, they completely built up their Unani system. And they adopted the methods which were used in India, in Rome and in Greece. So this was the period when Charak in India was very popular and was finding out new medicines in India. And so people from Europe came to learn from India also. The Renaissance period. Now see, this is the glorious period. Renaissance means it was a period of intellectuals. This is a period of intellectuals. Yeah, many renowned people came in this period. And again Rome started flourishing in this period. And it is said to be the period of alchemy. You know what is alchemy?
Yes.
What is it? Alchemy means making gold. That is alchemy. It is, but see, actually, this period is known as the period of alchemy. It means people knew how to make gold. It is not like that. People started having so much of knowledge that it is like obtaining gold. So, in real sense, alchemy, see, this was the time when elixir was, the words elixir, that is the fountain of youth or life, elixir, amrut, what we say, amrut. So this was the period of elixir, this was the period of alchemy. But elixir again, amrut means it is something which is very good and which is beneficial. So this was the time when the intellectual increased and people had started having more and more knowledge. This age gave the humanitarian approach. See, till now, as you see that there were holes which were drawn in the skull of the person. So they were all inhuman methods of treatment. If you go back to Hahnemann also, our introductory part of Organon, then you will have human cancer, there was venesection, the blood was allowed to flow. Then there was application of moxa. Then there was beating the patient, chaining the patient, using of acids. And so all those inhuman methods, gradually they were coming to a standstill. Dignity to the individual was given, and it was a time of spiritual freedom from the clutches of the church. Because as I said, the priests were the most predominant people. But this was the time when the individuals started coming out. They started growing. Now, during this age, you must have heard the word Leonardo da Vinci. During this age, he was one of the most prominent contributors. All of you must have heard about Leonardo da Vinci, right? I hope. Yeah, so the famous painting Mona Lisa. He was a painter, a very, very good painter. His painting Mona Lisa is famous till today also, which is still there in the museum in Paris. And it is said that maximum tourists go to visit that daily. The maximum amount of visitors going to the Louvre Museum in Paris because of this painting, Mona Lisa. He was not only a painter, what he was doing was that he had dissected 30 dead bodies by the candlelight. And then he had written almost 6,000 pages. And where he had described precisely the arteries, veins, nerves, the insertions of the muscles, the actions of the muscles. He had described it. And many of the visceras also. See, in a very, very, very early age, he had done this remarkable work, and against the law, he used to go to a cemetery, and in that cemetery at night, by the candlelight, he had dissected 30 bodies. And being a very good painter, because you have seen Mona Lisa, it is famous because the lines of the cheek and the lines of the eye and the twinkling of the eye, everything you can see in it. So this man is therefore known as the father of anatomy. What I said, that this was the man who was ahead of his time. Just by seeing the body, the dead bodies, he had drawn everything. And if you see his pictures also, then you can, that is the reason that you can see the muscles, like if you see some of his pictures, he has drawn the biceps, he has drawn it completely. Not only that, he had drawn the flight of a bird. If a bird is taking off and flying, then the entire curve of the flight he had drawn, and from that, he had made a picture of helicopter. The same man can use the chopper. So the flying machines, which he called flying machines. He had drawn different models of flying machines. See, way back. So he had drawn the flying machines. Not only that, many, many military weapons were found in his drawing. He had made the picture of parachute. He had made the picture of war tank. He had made the picture of machine gun. He had made the picture of submarine. And many more. So, he had made the pictures of guns also. That from the flight, see, he was able to study the flight. So he was able to say that this is how a bullet also can travel and it can be used. So different such drawings were done by Leonardo da Vinci. It is da Vinci because he was a son of parents who were not wedded. The father was a rich person and the mother was a farmer, a peasant. And therefore da Vinci. Vinci was the name of the mother. So she is the son of da, his son of Vinci. So this is why his name was, and he, like his life was miserable because he had many row of stepmothers. But I don't know whether you have seen the movie also, Vinci Code, Da Vinci Code. A movie also had come. And there is a book which is written by Dan Brown about from which the movie is made. And I would say that the book is far, far, far better than the movie. The movie is hardly 5% of the book. So their entire Leonardo da Vinci, you can take 3 hours on that also. So that much contribution this man had. And later on he was drawing for the church also. He was drawing the ceilings of the church. Right now also in Vatican City, the Sistine Chapel, he has drawn the entire ceiling. But then what happened that he drew the picture of the Last Supper. You all must be knowing the Last Supper, the last food which Jesus Christ had with his disciples. And in that, he drew a female sitting near Jesus Christ. And it is believed, now this is a controversial topic, that Mary Magdalene was the wife of Jesus Christ. And the Christianity do not believe that Jesus Christ was not married. And this is the Holy Grail. This is again another controversial topic, the Holy Grail. But because of that, Vinci was criticized by the church. The church did not accept it. And then in the later part of his life, he had to live a very miserable life, though he was such a genius. But he was the man who was the pioneer for the aircrafts, who was the pioneer for the military equipments, but he was a pioneer for our field. He was the pioneer in anatomy. And these are some of the paintings of Leonardo da Vinci as well as pictures of Rome, how he started drawing anatomy. So this is it. The 17th century, now we come to the 17th century, it is known as the century of geniuses. Even Dr. Hahnemann has written it as a century of geniuses because this was the century where science started growing very fast, very, very fast. And the different branches of science came up like physics, chemistry, botany, and from that even the branch of medicine separated and it started growing on its own. So this was the century of the geniuses. The remarkable contributors were, as I said, Lord Francis Bacon, the father of objective and realistic philosophy. I told you he wrote the book Organon, where he described how to reason from the antecedent to the consequence, that is inductive logic, and from the consequence to the antecedents, that is deductive logic. He explained in his book Novum Organon, as I told you, he was just a philosopher, not a medical person. But he was the man who started the scientific spirit in entire Europe by his writing. People started asking questions, antecedents. One particular phenomenon, from that you come to a general law. The apple is falling, one phenomenon. If you drop the pen from here, it will come down. If I drop this mic from here, it will come down. Particular phenomena. All objects dropped from above will come down. General law from the particular phenomena. That is inductive logic. Reasoning from the antecedent to the consequence, to the end, to the result. And the opposite is consequence to the antecedent, that is deductive logic. All objects dropped from above will fall down. So if the mic is dropped from here, it will fall down. From the general to the particular. So that was his description of inductive and deductive logic. That is Lord Bacon, and who was the role model for Dr. Hahnemann too, and he adopted all his methods, including the style of writing aphorisms. He had adopted from here. Then, along with Lord Bacon, very desperate, he was again one of the persons who started the scientific spirit in Europe. But he was the father of subjective and idealistic philosophy. His main concern was idealistic. And why? Because he was the person who said that man is made up of body and soul. He gave this concept of soul, that it is not only the physical body, but along the body can function because of an energy, and that energy is the soul. So this is for the first time he gave this concept, and therefore he is known as the Oracle of France. Denis Descartes is respected in France. He was a French philosopher. Bacon was a British philosopher. But both of them are responsible for the scientific spirit. So Denis Descartes was the Oracle of France. Then, as you have heard the famous name Galileo Galilei, he gave the relation between mechanics and measurements. As you know, he found out the telescope and he was able to see the stars and the planets, and he described it. Then William Harvey, as you know, the father of experimental medicine and father of midwifery. Now the important thing about William Harvey was that he described
systemic circulation.
Circulation of blood.
Systemic
He
circulation.
precisely described for the first time the circulation of blood. The entire circulatory cycle was described by him. And second thing, the important thing which he wrote was that all living beings develop from an egg, which he did not use the word embryo, but he said that there is some cell, or he did not use the word egg also, but there is some one single cell from which the entire living being develops. So these were the two revolutionary things which were contributed by Harvey. Then Robert Boyle, you must have heard in the chemistry, the Boyle's law, the ionic gas, and the experiment which all of us must have performed in our primary school days. That is, the candle is burning, and if you put a glass on it, it gets extinguished. And so for the first time, he was the one who told that oxygen is necessary for combustion. So this is what is his contribution, and Boyle's law, of course. Thomas Sydenham, again, his mention is in Organon, in the introductory part of Organon. He was again a man who had contributed. He is known as the English Hippocrates. He was a Britisher. And in Organon it is mentioned as that he was in between Hippocrates and Hahnemann. He was in the middle. That is how it is mentioned in Organon. Why? Because this man, for the first time, talked about individualization. He talked about a tailor-made medicine for each person. He said that the man is reacting in his own way. The stimuli may be common for 10 people, but each one is going to react in his own way. So that was the concept of individualization which was given by Dr. Hahnemann. But then when it came, he was a practitioner. When it came to give medicines, he started giving specific medicine. That is, according to the name of the disease, the medicine is given. So he thought about the concept of individualization, but he was not able to implement it. And therefore he said in between Hippocrates and Hahnemann. Hahnemann also gave this concept of individualization. He also talked about it. But implementation, Hahnemann did it to find out the simillimum and give it to the patient, not to use specifics. But then what this man did was he was using these specifics, and therefore in Organon introduction, if you read, he is called as in between Hippocrates and Hahnemann. But otherwise he gave this concept of individualization which was unique at that time, and therefore he is called the English Hippocrates. The 18th century, I hope you all are not getting bored. Nobody is feeling sleepy. If you all are feeling sleepy,
No, and then
I hope so. 18th century, again, if you read Organon also, in the introduction it is written that there is a plethora of theories. Plethora, too much. So many theories. Hahnemann has also written in the very first aphorism footnote. that it is time that the medicine of speculation must be converted into a medicine of experience, right? In the first footnote. Because there were so many theories, so many speculations. If this will happen, this can happen, this can happen, this can be given. But nothing was proved. So, complex theories, but when it came to the practical use, many a times those theories failed. And that is why Hahnemann wrote that it is time we convert the medicine of speculation to the medicine of experience. That we start using these theories. If they are not useful, they should be discarded. So, this was the century where there was plethora of theories and hypotheses. It was all speculations related to disease nature, cause of the disease, and the therapeutics. And these parts you find in the history of medicine also. If you go to the introductory part of Organon, again you find these things. That people started dividing into different groups. I'm sorry to say, which is happening today in homeopathy also. That there are different groups, different schools which are developing. We are the ones, we practice only classical homeopathy. We do only on the miasmatic prescription. We are this school, we practice the sensation method. See, I'm not criticizing anyone, but as teachers of Organon, it's our responsibility that we tell the students that stick to the source books, stick to Hahnemannian Organon, and keep the concept of individualization in your mind. In some, the concomitants are PQRS. In some, the constitution itself is something which is very rare. So, in some places, the chief complaint is a PQRS. So it's not that only this. You take to the past history, we prescribe only on the past history. Now I have recently heard they take to the previous birth also. And on that the prescription is done. Now, who knows about the previous birth? And so, these are the different thoughts, different schools which are prevalent today also. And at that time also, there was one group, one school, that everything is mechanical. On the law of mechanics, the entire nature is functioning. And on that, the diseases are occurring. Materialistic school of thought, which even Hahnemann had described, materia fecans. That is, for all diseases, materia fecans must be found out, and that must be removed or must be killed. And that is the reason why venesection was used during that time. That there is some impurity in the blood has become impure, and so that impure blood must be allowed to flow away. And that is venesection. The same thing, leech application. The blood has become impure, and so the skin disease is not getting cured, or so the fever is not getting cured. And so the blood must be the leech must suck the blood. And Hahnemann was bold enough during that time that for a prince, he was saying the prince, venesection was done repeatedly by the royal physician. In Richard's biography it is written that the prince was sick and most probably had pleurisy. And venesection was repeatedly done. In a fortnight, twice it was done. And that prince died. And Dr. Hahnemann was bold enough that he wrote in a public pamphlet which was circulated that the prince died because of the fault of the royal physician, for which he was severely criticized, and he had to leave that town and go away. But this is mentioned not only over here, but it is mentioned in our Organon also, that these were the schools. Then there was the vitalism, which believed that there is a vital energy, and matter cannot be animated by matter. It requires an energy for animation to produce any functions, and so that was the school of vitalism. And finally naturalism, that they believed in the law of nature, that everything is natural, whatever is happening is natural, and so they must be treated with natural means and methods only. So these were the different schools of thoughts in the 18th century. And again, as I said, that from the 17th century onwards, the Renaissance period started, the intellectuals started coming, the geniuses started coming. Some of the outstanding contributors were Sir Isaac Newton, the law of gravitation, which we just mentioned. Of course, Dr. Samuel Hahnemann, the father of experimental pharmacology, employed the law of similia, discovered primary and secondary action of medicine, Organon of medicine, which was revised 6 times, materia medica pura, and chronic diseases. So there are many contributions. We can take 3 hours on that also. This is how I've precisely tried to mention. Then von Haller, who wrote 12 books of physiology, 4 books of anatomy, and 7 books of botany. He was one of the important contributor. John Hunter, invaluable contribution to pathology, surgery, anatomy, and comparative physiology. Hunter has described the gunshot wound. He had described many diseases like pleurisy. So this man, he had done many contribution in the field of pathology by describing various diseases, not giving the name, but the diseases were precisely described. And of course, Edward Jenner, the father of vaccination, who found out the vaccination for smallpox, but from the experiment with cowbirds. The cowpox was not produced in the people who were looking after the cows, and from that he self-injected himself, and he found out the vaccination for smallpox. And people who were dying in thousands because of smallpox. Because of this vaccination, he saved the world from smallpox. Not only that, now smallpox got eradicated from the world. So that was a very big contribution by giving the concept of vaccination by Edward Jenner. Now we come to the 19th century. It was the beginning of organized advancement of science. And outside, see, to make it a bit precise, I have taken only the known contributors who have done, because in each century there were around 20-25 contributors. It was more than that sometimes. But the chief ones, or the ones which are related to the medical field, or the ones which brought a change overall in science, I have taken only those. Now see, this one is Florence Nightingale, whose name you must have heard, all of you. She established the nursing as profession. During the World War, she was looking after the wounded soldier. And Florence was her name. And she was given this title of Nightingale. Nightingale is a bird who is having a very sweet sound. And she very delicately looked after the wounded soldiers. And so she was given this title. Then Sir Charles Bell, he discussed 2 types of nerves, the sensory and the motor nerves. Gray, as we know, published the anatomy, Gray anatomy. Now the students study Chorussia. In our time there was no Chorussia, we were studying Gray. And so I still have got my Gray. So that is Gray's anatomy. Then Augusto Gallet laid foundation of local anesthesia for the first time. Louis Pasteur, again a very well-known name. He found the method of preventing putrefaction known as pasteurization. Even today the milk is pasteurized. So we use this word pasteurization. He was the pioneer of preventive medicine due to the germ theory of disease and his contribution of anti-rabies vaccination. He, for the first time, explained the concept of microorganism without a microscope. See, the thing was that he was not able to prove it because he did not have the microscope. So the concept of bacteria or microorganism was described by him, and he found out how to remove these impurities from the food which we eat, and therefore that the food does not get spoiled. Because of these microorganisms, the food will not get spoiled. So that is how he had described pasteurization. But unfortunately at that time the microscope was not there, and so he was not able to describe it. Same thing, this is the reason why we call Dr. Hahnemann the father of bacteriology. Because in 1882, Robert Koch described, known for his study of bacteria using oil lensing microscope. In 1882, his biggest triumph was discovering the Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Now, there in 1825 also. He had written the Asiatic cholera which is prevailing in Asia, especially India. See, this is what Hahnemann has written. Especially on the bank of river Ganges, means Ganga. Maybe that cholera is due to innumerous, very, very minute, some organisms, see he has not used micro, miasmatic beings. The word which is used was miasmatic beings. Miasmatic beings which can produce disease, symptoms, which can make you sick. And beings means it is living beings. So what Hahnemann wrote, that maybe this Asiatic cholera is because of innumerous miasmatic beings which are so small that they cannot be seen by the naked eye. And in the sailors who stay on the bank of Ganges in damp, dingy boats, this spreads, and then these sailors go to the villages and they give this spread to the villages. See, this is how he has described. He had completely described the bacteria. He had not come to India. Cox had come to India. He did not come to India. He did not have the microscope. And almost 50 years before him, that was 25, this is 82. So almost 50 years before, not only he has said about it, he has wrote about it, he has written it. And what is described that they are living beings, means they are living, they are moving, they are miasmatic, means they are disease giving, plenty in number. And sailors are living in dingy boats, means there was marsh, there was water, there was dampness, there was darkness, they were living in the boats. Because see, if you remember, at that time, river Ganges was the main source of navigation. Right? There were no airplanes or trains. The navigation, all the goods which were taken from one place to another place, all business was done by the rivers. Business was done by the rivers, on the rivers. So there were so many sailors coming from outside to India, from India going outside. And these sailors did not have any house. So what they did, they lived in their boats only. And this was a closed, compact place, which was very dark, which was very damp. And they were eating in that same place, defecating also in the same place. And that is how the infection of cholera was spreading. And then these people went to the villages for business or for any other purposes. And they gave to the village people. And then in the entire village, cholera was spreading and people were dying in millions. If you read again in the history of India, हेजे का राक्षस आके पूरा का पूरा गांव निकल जाता है. हेजा इस कॉलर और हेजे का राक्षस आके पूरा गांव निकल जाता है. Again, supernatural theory. And this description, Hahnemann sitting in Germany, completely given it. Till then, he also had the materialistic concept. And then gradually it changed after the law of dynamization. His concept of materialistic changed. But then, in 1882, he came to India with the microscope. And in the intestine of the dead people, in the stool of the living people, he saw this comma-shaped 1 by 10,000 size of bacteria, bacillus. Right? He saw it with the microscope. And if you read Stuart Claus, you must have read it. They had done those experiments also. That they had prepared a gelatin broth of these organisms, microorganisms, and they had taken it, ingested it. And around 20-25 people had done it, and there was no result. When they took the bacteria in a mild broth had that liquid like which they prepared, the culture. So that they had taken, they had ingested. Cox had come to India. And then colleagues. Nothing happened. Cholera was not produced. Then again in Paris, the same experiment was done with other people. I think so Pettencourt or something was the name of the person who did it in Paris also. And at that time, most of them did not have, but one person had and it was almost fatal. He was about to die, and so then his experiments were stopped. Now see, again, it gives our own support to our concept. The bacteria beacons may be present, but the disease may not be produced because the vital force is not released. So they had taken the broth, but still cholera was not produced. So the concept again which Hahnemann had written in 1825, that materia beacons are there, but the disease did not get produced. The same concept, that the susceptibility of the person was not ready and the vital force was not reached, and so it was not produced. But anyway, he is known as the father of bacteriology, but we very well known Dr. Hahnemann was the pioneer or the father of bacteriology because he had described the bacteria 50 years before Koch, and that too without a microscope. So tuberculosis is today also known as Koch's disease. Sigmund Freud started the discipline of psychoanalysis, a very well-known name in the field of psychology. Again, I would like to say, same thing about Hahnemann. I'm going back to Hahnemann, I hope you don't mind. But from the history of medicine, we are going back to Hahnemann again. Same thing, in 1810, Hahnemann published the first edition of Organon, where he had described psychotherapy. Right, psychotherapy. He has written aphorism 228 to 29. Where he has described the 210 onwards is mental diseases, and 228 to 29 is he has described various types of psychotherapy. That if the patient is very rude, then just ignore the patient, or if the patient is throwing things, then see that something which is breakable does not come within his way. So different types. You become the friend, philosopher by your expressions. You try to console the people, show confidence. So he has described various types of psychotherapy. Not only that, if you read the biography of Dr. Hahnemann, he had worked in an asylum, maybe because of the need of money. I think so the governor of Transylvania gave him a job in an asylum because he was a poor person and just for to sustain himself. And it is said that when he went to that asylum, mental hospital, he saw that the patients were beaten, they were chained, they were kept in dark rooms, isolation, and they were given electric shocks. And Hahnemann realized that these inhuman methods are worsening the condition of the patient. And so what he did was that he started giving compassion, love, friendly counseling. And during his stay in that asylum, it is said that the curative rate in that asylum, he stayed there for 1 year or something like that, the curative rate of that asylum increased by more than 20%. So that is the thing which he realized at a very, very, very initial age. And this was his remarkable study and remarkable output for the asylum. And later on also he had treated the counselor of one of the king. And he had stayed in isolation with that person who was a very famous person. And he had said, his name is also from
Glockenberg.
Yeah, Glockenberg. He had stayed with Glockenberg in a separate castle. And he was a very intelligent minister. And he had cured him. And he had seen to it that any exciting factors which can aggravate the condition of that person does not come before him, and so he had stayed in isolation with that person and cured him completely. And because of that, he had become very famous, Hahnemann, and people started coming from all over Germany for the treatment of mental diseases. And so one fine day he fled from the city and went to another city because he did not wanted to treat the same type of people. So this is what Hahnemann had already realized, he had already introduced. And in the very first edition of Organon, he had precisely written about it. mental diseases. Sigmund Freud came in 1900, and his first book on clinical psychotherapy was published in 1910, 100 years after Hahnemann. So who is the father of psychotherapy? 100 years after Hahnemann, he wrote about it. And he was more famous. He is known as the father of psychotherapy, but he was famous for the Oedipus complex. He described the Oedipus complex. You must be knowing what is Oedipus complex. What is it? So that you wake up from your sleep. Because I am asking. What is it? Oedipus complex.
The daughter will idolize the father.
Yeah, very good. And the son will response to the mother. Yeah. So that is, he said that the sexuality or the attraction for the opposite sex begins in a very, very young age, as in a childhood. So that was his concept. And so he emphasized on that. And he saw to it that these histories were taken. See, the case taking is history. It correlates with our case taking. That the history of the childhood, the history of the past, the relation with the parents especially, is very, very responsible in the growth of the personality of the person. His childhood and his relation with the parents. So he emphasized on this point. And so the case taking part which we have got in Organon, he was more into it. Carl Jung was his follower. They had worked together for 7 years, but then they separated. Even in Organon, both these names are mentioned. But then they both separated in the commentary of Organon, not by Dr. Hahnemann, but in the commentary. And he was more into analytic psychology, that is psychotherapy. This was the man who described psychotherapy completely. And he advocated these various methods which we are using, listening to the patient, very keenly, quietly, not interrupting the patient, and then showing by our gestures, by our body language, that you have faith in that person, confidence in that person, the person is full of sense, and so this is how you treat. So it is more about the psychotherapy, which we have already got in Organon.
The 4 functions of the consciousness he has described.
Yeah,
He
yes.
has written 20 volumes on dreams.
Dreams, yeah, that is what I was going to say. The dreams which we emphasize, we give importance. The dreams are very, very precisely described by Carl Jung. Yes, some of for this again I would like to say that I had done my PG. My guide was Dr. L. Khan sir. You must have heard about him. He was the HOD of Organon in the NIH, National Institute of Calcutta. And when I was doing my PG, I hope I've got time, I'm taking something else. So when I was doing my PG, he had come to our college for a lecture, and 3 students were there under him. And he came from Kolkata to Ahmedabad, and for each of us, he had brought this big bag, full of books. And in that, there were so many books of culture. And it was so interesting. He had come for only 1 day, so it was not possible to read all these books. That day, in the evening, I went to a photocopy shop. I requested them that I need the photocopy of this. My husband took half the books to another shop. I was sitting in another shop. Then till 1 o'clock, that man went on doing it. Then next day again he called me. Again half the day I was not able to go to the college. We kept on doing photocopies. And then that night, he was going on the next day morning. He had an early flight. But that night, he was just explaining and teaching us. Fortunately, 2 of us were able to go to him. The one other candidate was not able to come. So the 2 of us, he was teaching till around 2 o'clock in the morning. Then from there only he went to the airport. And another interesting thing was when he was bringing these books from Kolkata to Ahmedabad, his was a flight from Kolkata to Ahmedabad to Jaipur. Now when the flight landed in Ahmedabad, he did not come out. So one of my colleagues had gone to the airport to pick him up. So he saw that sir is not coming out, and at that time there were no mobiles. So he called his residence in Kolkata. So his wife got worried that where he has gone. He was in the aircraft, now where he is. He was so engrossed in reading that he did not realize that the flight has landed, all the passengers have left. Then the hostess, when other passengers were about to come, the hostess saw him. She said that Ahmedabad has already come, now this flight is going to Jaipur. So he came out. So after some time he came out. Then again he called his residence that sir has landed and sir has reached safely. So these are some of the stalwarts of Organon. And he told me, he used to tell me Beti also. Then in Central Council of Homeopathy, CCH, we both were members together, me and sir. We both were academicians, nothing to do with politics. So in the CCH hall, it is a staff hall. So me and sir, we used to sit on the last bench, last row, and listen to all arguments, the political drama going on in CCH. We would witness that without any contribution. So that is, then afterwards I started meeting sir again and again. But he told me that never go to sleep without reading one aphorism of Ayurveda. That is what he told me. And one medicine from Medicare. Make it a point. Honestly, I don't do it. But in the initial days, I did it when he had told me. Now I'm not doing it. But this is what Ellen Hansa had told me.
Essence of the lecture.
Essence of the lecture. Read one aphorism daily.
Ma'am, there is one more nice book, The Carpet Weaver of the Night.
Carpet Weaver of the Night. Written by Alchemy.
It's based on the summarized version of all the works of Carl.
Okay. He has written beautifully on dreams, interpretations of the dreams, and so many.
This book integrates Carl Jung had never met Hahnemann, but this book is an integration of homeopathy and Carl Jung. It is as if Hahnemann meets Carl Jung, and how those interpretations of dreams have significance in homeopathy in one book. It's the first book.
Okay. Who is the author?
Dr. Luke the Shepherd. And Dr. Luke the Shepherd had come to Goa in 2014. Dr. L.M. Khan was also the speaker. And when Dr. Luke the Shepherd gave a talk on the dream catcher, which was one chapter of this book, and Dr. L.M. Khan said, this fellow is a genius. And that book is published now in the year 2020. Very nice.
L.M. Khan sir's daughter's name is Shahina. So he used to call me Shahina because my name is Heena and his daughter's name was Shahina. Okay. Now the 20th century, nothing to say about it. We have lived in that century. This is the period which is known as the golden age of medicine, as there were many advancements in medical science. The main system of medicine is allopathy. Various sources of drugs are mineral, animal, vegetable, and synthesized. Now, so this is again, it is all the knowledge of allopathy. So we are not going into the details. Now, do we have a break or we continue? The break is there, okay. Because now we come to the different civilizations. We have finished the ages, so we come to the civilization. So every day, do you have a break?
Yes. 5 minutes break.
Okay, because there we were having it.
10 minutes.
Yeah. We have it.
Okay, I don't know about this. So that is
10 minutes break.
okay. Now the important civilization. Iraq, the place which is now Iraq, or it was known as this. And this was the cradle of civilization. Why? Because it was known as the cradle of civilization. Because this was the phase, this was the land, or this was the period where the concept of equality came. And that is why civilization, that man was considered to be equal, and like whether he is a rich person or a poor person, he will be getting equal treatment from the doctors, and he will be treated as an equal or belonging to any tribe or any caste. So that concept started, that the low and the high were not differentiated, and therefore this period was known as the cradle of civilization. Now during, in this part, in the region of Iraq, or between the two rivers, Euphrates and Tigris, the doctors who were practicing, they were known as internists or the herb doctors. Herb doctors means they were giving medicines which were prepared from the vegetable kingdom. Then there were the doctors who started using the surgical instruments, and they were called the knife doctors. And finally, for different types of mental ailments, again the methods, different methods of psychotherapy began. This was the beginning. And so they were known as the spell doctors. But see, again the word spell comes. So there was the concept of witchcraft also during this period. That they also believed in, especially in the dead, that the dead souls who have already left the earth, these souls are controlling the life of people. They are giving health and disease to the people. And so the spell doctors especially, they had that practice of talking to the dead. They're like calling the spirit and talking to the dead people. And from those, so they were known as spell doctors, Jadoo Kare, so that is spell doctors. So they were talking to the dead people and finding out the ailments of the people, as well as finding out the cure for that people. So though the advancement had started, the use of surgical instruments, the crude surgical instruments had started, but still the science was not predominant, because their culture was more or less that the dead remained with the family, and they were the ones who were responsible to look after the health of the family. And so that talking to the dead, you must have played in your school days, any good spirit passing by may come in, that you put a coin and that coin passes, so that spirit were called upon for cure. Now, but this was again an age of advancement. But it was the age of advancement. The people staying in that area, those people were known as the Sumerians, and they found out this uniform system of writing. What they used to do, that on the clay or mud, wet mud or clay, the writing, the uniform form of writing was in the form of wedges, like wedges. They made wedges on, like how you, wedges are like this, like this, then again another. How we write Y, how we write X. So those wedges, they were making different shapes of wedges, and that were the letters. And on the clay or on the wet mud, it was written, and then it was dried up. And this dried clay pieces were the prescriptions. The medicines or the treatment was written in the form of uniform form of writing, and then it was dried up and it was preserved. That for this illness, this is the medicine, and not only preserved, it was transported also. This dried form of prescriptions were transported. The oldest prescription comes from dating to 2100 BC. So this is quite back, and it was written on tablets. These tablets, what I am saying, the clay tablets or the mud tablets, on the wet tablets it was written, then it was dried, and then it was transported to other places also. So that was the form of writing prescriptions. Some other important contributions of this area was cloth and textiles. The use of cloth started, especially they were using cotton, more of cotton, and therefore because of this use of cotton fabric, linen it is said as linen, the sanitization also came. Use of linen, cotton and sanitization. Then they made seals, stamps and stills. Then they studied the stars, that is the astrological tables were made, mining ores, so they started the concept of mining, finding out the ores from the ground, from the earth. The solar calendar was prepared. They started doing the weights and measures also. The wheel was invented previously, and so the wheel brought all the revolution in the history of mankind. And they started doing irrigation also, that is giving water to the plants and harvesting the plants and eating the crops also. So this part was this civilization gave many big contribution to the world. And the biggest contribution of the Mesopotamian to medicine was the code of ethics laid down by King Hammurabi of Babylon, 1728 to 1686 BC, which described the conduct of physicians and the guidelines for health practitioners. So, see, it was the first codification of medical practice. Now, King Hammurabi, who was from Babylon, in this code there were 282 laws. He had written 282 laws, different laws. How a man should practice, how a physician should practice. And these laws are also known as the draconian laws. Why it is known as draconian? Because rest of the thing was all correct, like how to behave with your patient, how to respect your patient, how the hygiene must be maintained to advise to your patient. Same what is written in the fourth aphorism of Organon, that the physician is a preserver of health also. So all knowledge of preservation of health is mentioned. The hygiene for the physician himself. But it is draconian because if the skill of a physician or a surgeon is able to cure your patient, then he should be awarded. But if he fails to cure, then his hands must be chopped off. So that is the draconian law which was mentioned in this code of ethics, which was written in that era and which was again inhuman. That if a physician failed to cure his patient, then his hands must be chopped off. So this was the code of ethics. Majority of the part was correct. But then there were some inhuman measures also mentioned in this code of ethics. Though there was social evolution, the medicine was devoid of scientific foundation. Mesopotamia was cradle of magic and necromancy, that is talking to the dead. To the dead people, which I told you previously, that they believed that the dead people are responsible for health and disease. And so talking to them and finding out the solution, it was not scientific. So though it was growing, there were so many big inventions. Civilization was there, it is known as the Cradle of Civilization, but science did not advance during this area or during this civilization. Okay, the Greek medicines, 460 to 136 BC, in the BC that is before Christ, you go opposite. The Greeks, the civilizers of ancient world, they taught why and how, right? What we said, rational. Why and how. To ask the question why this happens and how this happens. So just not asking questions, but finding out a rational explanation for all the questions which are asked. So this was the beginning of, in the Greek civilization, of reaching to the roots of science, or the beginning of the science itself. That now people did not take for granted whatever the priest told them. And for that they started asking questions. That if the priest said that he is possessed by a evil spirit, then man started questioning. And then not only questioning, they tried to find out that what is the reason behind all diseases. Early leader was Asclepius, 1200 BC, son of goddess Apollo. He was the symbol of medicine. Now see this Asclepius. Have you heard the word Asclepius? Yes. Where you have heard?
Greek medicine system.
Greek medicines. Anywhere else?
Asclepius in balance.
Yes. What is that Asclepius in balance?
80 symbol is also symbol medicine.
Yeah. Asclepius symbol is along the staff. So he was carrying a stick, a staff, which had a serpent round it. And see, Aesculapius in balance is one of the forerunners of Organon of medicine. It is forerunner of Organon of medicine, wherein right from the time of Aesculapius till the time of Hahnemann, there is no progress, no growth in the field of medicine is explained. And therefore it is known as the forerunner of Organon. Precursor of Organon. So it is one of the precursor of Organon. It was written in 1805 when Medicine of Experience was written. When Hahnemann wrote the Medicine of Experience, so at that time also Aesculapius in balance. But why the word Aesculapius was used? That right from the time of Aesculapius till Hahnemann's time, that is 1805, the growth in the medical field was not satisfactory. It had not taken as it should take place, and so it was not in balance. That is what has been explained. So this is this early leader Aesculapius. It is believed, because see, they had that Greek people had gods for everything. They had God for the beauty, they had God for children, they had God for childbirth. So they had gods for everything. So they had that mythological concept in all their day-to-day life also. So he was the symbol of medicine. He had two daughters who were worshipped as Hygia, the goddess of health, and Phoenicia, the goddess of medicine. And they both created dynasties of Hectors, that is curative, and Hyginus, that is preventive. See, this is our own concept right now also. Or we take homeopathy also. That Hahnemann said that in the third aphorism he has described the different knowledges to cure your patient. He has described it, right? And in the fourth aphorism he says that he is also likewise a preserver of health. Not only a therapeutist, but he has to preserve the health also. That is also the responsibility of a physician. He has just not to cure the sick people, but he has to see that the healthy remains healthy in the society. So this is the same concept, that not only curative, but it should be preventive also. Now this was a big personality in the Greek. See this staff with the serpent, and this has become a symbol of medicine, because his personality was so empowering. And he contributed so much to the Greek medicine that till today also it remains the symbol of medicine. Aesculapius was the Hellenes god of medicine. This place name is, that temple name is. Many temples were built to worship him, and they were the first schools of medicine where enemas, baths, massages were given. See, in Greek you find, even today also in Greek you find, in Rome also, that there are temples where he is worshipped as a lord, as a god. And previously, these temples were nothing but hospitals. They were schools where people learned also how to practice medicine, like different types of massages, different types of enemas. So people learned also, and the patients were brought also. So they were temples, but the temples were used as schools as well as hospitals in the Greek time. Thales was chief of the seven sages. This was another personality. I have not taken all the seven sages because it takes a bit long time and they have not big contribution. But Thales was among the seven sages, seven saints of Greece. He was famous as a father of science, and he was the one who measured the length of pyramids. This is again Egypt, pyramids, by their shadow. So that was his contribution. He drew angles and circles and activated theorems. So he was again the contributor to geometry, and he predicted the eclipse of sun. Now see, he was again a man who was ahead of his time. He was able to tell that it was believed that the sun is something, a mythological event which is taking place, the eclipse. But he was the one who described the eclipse, and he contributed a lot to geometry also. Of course, the greatest physician in Greek medicine was Hippocrates. Now, Hippocrates was son of a priest of Aesculapius. As I said, that Aesculapius was believed as a god. Then in his temples or the hospitals, there were other priests also. Like in a temple there is priest. So actually those priests were doctors who were teaching other students and who were treating people. Now, Hippocrates was son of one temple, and in his initial days, he was a staunch believer of Asclepius. He followed Asclepius strongly. He was the father of medicine, and he is epitomized as the Greek medicine. As we know that we take the Hippocratic oath, in allopathy they take the Hippocratic oath because he is known as the father of medicine. So in his name they take an oath. We take in the name of Dr. Hahnemann, but in allopathy the Hippocratic oath is taken. He challenged the tradition of magic in medicine. He studied disease on observation and reasoning and application of clinical methods in medicine. Hippocrates' writings and lectures are compiled as Corpus Hippocratium, 72 volumes in the first scientific clinical histories. Now, he had published the clinical histories in 72 volumes. Now, see, at that age, if you realize, just like Dr. Hahnemann to homeopathy, he was a very, very huge contributor in the field of medicine. He had written 72 volumes where he had described the different types of clinical manifestations. The contribution of Hippocrates, the father of medicine, he separated medicine from religion and challenged the tradition of magic. He believed that body must be treated as a whole. See, if you see, there are so many Hahnemannian concepts in Hippocrates. He was the first to accurately describe the symptoms of pneumonia and epilepsy, treat the person as a whole. He described fevers according to their intermittency. Again, we have got intermittent fevers where Hahnemann has described the 4 types of intermittent fevers. He had also described it way back. He was first to understand the power of nature, diet, cleanliness, fresh air to cure diseases. He realized the concept of individualization, again our concept, sensations, emotions, personality traits, and the balance of the 4 humors. This is Ayurvedic concept. He developed an oath of medical ethics for the physician, which I told Hippocratic oath. Hippocrates wrote the book Air, Water and Places in a treatise on social medicine and hygiene. So he had contributed to hygiene also. His concept of health and disease stressed the relation between man and his environment. See, again the same. You can see that so many concepts are like our Hahnemannian concept, that man is always correlated or completely attached to his environment, and according to the environment, the health and the sicknesses are managed. So this concept was given by Hippocrates. After Hippocrates, the most important personality was Aristotle. Again, a very, very strong follower of Hippocrates, and he was a philosopher, biologist who believed in the theory of the 4 humors. Not only that, he was again a very good storyteller, he was a writer, and he also was an important factor who explained embryology and zoology in the history of medicine. So these were the contribution of Aristotle, and he was the first to differentiate, see, I told you zoology, vertebrates from the non-vertebrates. He observed and described the beating of the embryo, heart, and named the aorta. So he was the one who started embryology, the concept of embryology. He described the living world and its classification and theory of evolution of nature. I hope this is just to be understood, so I am not explaining it. Another Greek philosopher was Theo Parentis. He was the father of botany. His book, Historia Plantorum, described the therapeutic use of plants. See, this is again the plant kingdom came into role as a therapeutics. He explained the power of germination of seed, described method of collecting gum from the stems. And this gum again was used for medicinal purposes also. Herophilus, 335 BC to 280 BC, is known as the father of anatomy. As I told that Da Vinci way back, he had done the drawings. After that, the real anatomy started. He did first public dissection on the human body. I told you that Da Vinci did it in secret in the middle of the night with the candlelight. This was the public dissection of human body. He was first to count the pulse rates. He coined the name duodenum, prostate, retina, and the arachnoid. The venous sinuses he called after his name are known as prostacyclophily. So these are the contribution of Herophilus. These are all, do I need to read it? He is known as the father of philosophy. He distinguished between the cerebrum and cerebellum and sensory. Described the Greek philosophy, you can see that what advancement had started. The valves of the heart were described, the sensory and the motor nerves were described. So in the Greek philosophy, the real beginning started in Greek civilization. Because after the Romans fell, the Greeks were able to overcome the Roman civilization. Greeks rejected the supernatural theory of disease and saw disease as a natural process. They believed that matter was made up of 4 elements: earth, air, fire, water. Our Indian concept again, that we are made up of these 4 elements. These elements has corresponding qualities of being. See, earth is cold and it is related to the humor, that is phlegm. Then air is dry and it is related to yellow bile. Fire is hot and it is related to blood. And water is moist and related to the black bile. So this is how they had correlated the different humors, and these were the elements of the nature were correlated with the diseases. The diseases were occurring either in these places and they were related to the natural elements, and according to the sensations, cold, dry and hot and moist was there. So this is how the Greek philosophy started. Then after Hippocrates, because Hippocrates was the towering personality who ruled the field of medicine. Even after his death, his teachings continued till today. So among outstanding medical centers was Alexandria's museum, the first university of the world, especially medical university, which had a huge library of 70,000 books. This school replaced the school of Athens as world center of learning. This school changed medicine from magic to science. The Greek civilization was succeeded by the Roman civilization. But see, the Greeks had reached to such a height that the Roman civilization adopted many things from the Greek civilization. The only important thing which the Romans had was the sense of sanitation. That was the only thing. Okay, so you did not have tea previously. When you went out, you did not have tea.
No, I don't know.
I thought you were out for the tea. Okay. Roman civilization, that is 750 BC to 510 BC. Roman had great faith in magic and were believers of gods like Jupiter, god of rain, thunder, lightning, Isis, the god of universe, Mars, the god of war, Apollo, the punisher, Venus, the goddess of beauty, which we all know, Lucina, the goddess of childbirth. Again, like Greek, the Romans also had many mythological figures whom they worshipped. They were more advanced, they had more gods than the Greeks also. The Greeks also had many gods and goddesses, but the Romans had more. Now see, this is a game. If you go to Rome, if you go to France, this is again a very old civilization like us, like the Indian civilization. See what I told you. Romans had received the medicine knowledge from the Greek, but they had better and keen sense of sanitation. If you have, some of you, or if you have read about it, the Colosseum. Colosseum, have you heard about it? Colosseum, that gives you an idea of what good sanitization they had. Colosseum is a structure in Rome where they used to have fights. Your wrestlers. If you have seen the movie Gladiator. In that, the Colosseum is there, and where they used to have live fights between man and lion, between two men, between man and that bull fight. So that is the place Colosseum. Now it is not completely in ruins, but majority of it is broken. But still many tourists go there. Now, if you watch that Colosseum, I have seen it, so I'll telling you that underground, outside it is just like a entire ground stadium, and there are so many seats for the spectators, many seats. Like so many people can be accommodated. But if you go underground, now it is in ruins. There you find complete sanitation system which we have right now. The big huge pipes which were made out of stone. See, they did not have cement. But huge pipes for drainage. Not only drainage of dirty water, but rainwater drainage and rainwater harvesting you can see there. Now this is built before thousands of years. And you can see the rainwater harvesting which is done in that portion also. Now see, this was a public monument. It was for people to go and enjoy the fights only. And more or less it was very brutal. It was even inhuman. But still, if you see the construction of that place, so Roman construction is a very known thing in the archaeology. It is a very respected construction. But sanitation you find in all old monuments wherever you visit in Rome. You find that they look after the sanitation wonderfully. Even before 2000 years, that they were very keen on sanitation. They developed baths. See, here it is. Sewers, adequate hospitals, good roads, and pure water for the cities. And this you can see. Even underground sanitation is perfect. You don't, this, which we find right now in modern age, like there is a whole round tunnel in which a man could walk, and then it opens far away from the city into a big lake or something like that, where the rainwater can be collected. But huge tunnels like that, under each monument, each buildings. So this is what is Rome. He was Aulus Cornelius Celsus. Now see, this man, he had contributed so much to the Roman civilization, but he was not even a doctor, not even a philosopher, not related to medicine, not related to science. He was just a very rich man. He was a rich person, but who wanted to gather as much as knowledge possible. He was a rich merchant. He had nothing to do with philosophy, nothing to do with science or medical profession. But he was the most eminent Roman writer in medicine. He Artitus, his encyclopedia of knowledge, which includes law, philosophy, military, agriculture, rhetoric, and medicine. He included everything. Celsus wrote 8 volumes of De Medicina in 30 AD, which was the first comprehensive medical text. He classified disease by treatment and not by cause. See, again, this was a new concept, to classify disease by treatment and not by cause. He advocated the use of drugs, especially surgery, and importance of diet. These are the people who were thinking ahead of their time. In De Medicina, care of wounds is written, arresting bleeding by pressure, compression, and suturing or closure of vessels, suturing of wounds by bringing the edges together, management of fractures by immobilization, by splints and bandages of wax, floor paste and stiffening, using floor, atta, to stiffen, and there was use of clay also. For compound fracture, excision of the protruding bone segment, plastic surgery of nose, lips and ears was described by him. See, just imagine not being a doctor. Plastic surgery for restoration of prepuce in cases of circumcision, described surgical removal of stone from the bladder, and treadmilling, which was very new to that area, which was going on in the primitive age. Again, he started drilling in the skull. He derived surgical instruments like scalpels, forceps, hooks, probes, bone forceps. So being a man who had no basic education, he had done so much. He explained the 4 humors, and he explained the cardinal signs of inflammation: rubor, that is redness; calor, that is heat; dolor, that is pain; and humor, that is swelling. The 4 cardinal signs of inflammation were described by him way back. Now again, Soranus, who came after 100 years, he was not a woman, he was a man, but his magnum textbook for 15 centuries. He was the man who wrote for the first time, and his writings continued for years and years together. He wrote on gynecology and he wrote on obstetrics. So he was the father of gynecology and obstetrics. He described the female genital organs. He wrote on menstruation, amenorrhea, conception, contraception, breastfeeding, infertility, abnormal fetal position. Not only he wrote about the abnormal position, but he taught how to make the abnormal position normal also. So obstetric, his contribution is great. And manual methods to correct them, protection of perineum during labor, use of hooks and forceps delivery, care of neonates, on bleeding, dentitional problems, various pediatric illnesses. So see, this was a big contribution by Soranus. This is Asclepiades. He was from 124 to 40 BC. He was known as the Prince of Physicians. He was also known as the Hippocrates of prodigy. Now see, here you will find there are so many Hahnemannian concepts. This man. Hahnemannian concept, what is that? The second one? That is our second aphorism. Removal and annihilation of the disease in its whole extent. So that is what was explained by Asclepiades, and he had explained the chronic diseases also. So you find many in common with Organon. He described the march schedule, again described by Hahnemann, accurately, especially the periodicity. The 4 intermittent fevers which are described by Hahnemann. He distinguished between acute and chronic disease, again the Hahnemannian concept. He used music therapy for the insane, which is the latest one which is going on. In Ahmedabad, I don't know about your cities, but Ahmedabad, there are so many centers which have started. Some, they have specialized in different diseases also. In the cancer hospitals in Ahmedabad, some of the cancer hospitals, there are music departments, especially for the cancer patients. So not only, some of it is not curative, but for palliation. And to create a positive mentality in the mind of the people. They have started it in cancer hospitals. Some of our homeopathic doctors are practicing both. Even Dr. Rajan Shankaran, he has correlated many of the ragas with the homeopathic medicines. So this is way back, which was already described. Then he followed kindness and humanity for the insane. Again, Hahnemannian concept for the insane. Most significant contribution was establishing the practice of tracheostomy. He explained and described tracheostomy. He coined the term peritonitis for mental illnesses, that is inflammation of the brain. So this was again a man who was ahead of his time. This Cordes was a surgeon and known as the father of materia medica. He studied 600 plants. He used minerals like lead, copper, and remedies. These were some of the important. I have not taken all again, I am telling you. So if you find in other books some other names, but I have tried to see the ones who had done important contributions. I have covered only there. Now again, this important man, Galen. He was from 131 to 201 AD. We study Galenus. In homeopathy also, his name is used when Contraria Contraricus Curator, antipathy, the father of antipathy. He was a towering personality in the history of medicine like Hippocrates. Royal physicians for he was the royal physician for 3 successive emperors. For 3 emperors, he remained as a royal physician. He dominated for 1500 years more by his adamant outlook. For 1500 years, people followed him. And he was so adamant that there was no one who could question his knowledge. So he was that strong-headed. And for 1500 years, even after him, he was followed. And antipathy became very popular, which the law of contraria contraribus curator became very popular because of Dr. Galen. And he was a medical dictator. See, dictator means he challenged, means anyone who challenged him was severely punished by him. So that is why he was called a dictator. During this time, as he was a royal physician, no one one can question him. No one can question his authority. So he was that strong. And he wrote 22 volumes of Edito Princeps. Galen nurtured the modern idea that disease is due to 3 factors. Now see, this is a very, very correct idea. The predisposing, exciting and environmental, which is even our concept also, the concept of homeopathy and Dr. Hahnemann. So this idea, he was the first one, that there is a predisposing factor for all diseases and man is influenced by his surroundings. This idea he gave. Now these were the people who challenged Galen. Servetus, he discovered the pulmonary circulation and he said that what Galen is believing is wrong. But when he openly challenged Galen, he was punished in such a severe way that he was burnt alive. See, that is what I was saying that he was a medical dictator. Nobody could question him. And so this man was burnt alive because he had described, and he was absolutely correct in the description of pulmonary circulation. But he had to die. Then Andres was the father of modern anatomy. He described many, many concepts of anatomy, but he was thrown out of the town. There was a town called, I think so, Padu, and he had to leave Padu because he again challenged Galen, because he described anatomy in his way and some of the concepts of Dr. Galen were challenged. So that is the reason he had to leave the town. And William Harvey, who had discovered the systematic circulation, cardiac cycle, he also was harassed by Galen throughout his life. And he was not able to work further on his concepts of circulation or physiology. He was stopped doing this thing. So Galen had some very important contributions also. See, he described the 7 cranial nerves. He described this concept of disease also very accurately. So and then he gave this concept of contraria contraribus curenta, which Hahnemann also later on, in Organon he has said that if you have to use the palliative pathy, then antipathy is the best. If your case is the limitation of homeopathy, it is not in your scope, and you have to use antipathy, then, you have to give palliation to your patient, not cure. So if the patient is not curative, then antipathy is the best pathy. That is what was mentioned in Organon also. So some of his contributions were very outstanding, but some of his concepts were completely wrong. And if people tried to explain or tried to give another concept, like say one concept was that he had written that there is no bone marrow. The bones are hollow. And the blood is manufactured in the liver. The liver makes the blood. Then he had written that in the sternum, there are 7 bones. So some concepts were completely wrong. The maxilla has got more than 2 bones. So some of his concepts were absolutely wrong and they were challenged. But when they were challenged by people, the people had to die. So whatever he taught for 1500 years, blindly people went on following because of his dictatorship. So that was the bad part of Galen. Otherwise he described the 7 cranial nerves completely. So some concepts were completely correct. But there were some mistakes which nobody could rectify. Now, one more personality was Julius Caesar, and at that time there were wars, and in the wars the Romans were dying, and the barbarians were increasing in population. So this man, Julius Caesar, he said that in the dying women, because there were so many wars, and their population was going down, the Roman population. So from the dying woman's womb to remove the living fetus. So the population of Romans may not go down. And so from his name, the word Caesarean section. Because he was removing, he taught the people how to remove the living fetus from a dying mother. So that is why the Caesarean section. He asked to open the dying mother soon after their last breath during childbirth to rescue the living fetus. So see, at that time, the mortality, mother mortality rate was very high. Many women used to die in childbirth. So how to remove it, he taught. In modern times, it is known as cesarean section. Now we come to the Chinese medicine. See, I have taken only the important attribution of each civilization. Again, a very, very ancient form of medicine. Chinese, just like Indian, it is again a very ancient form. It is an organized herbal system of medicine of the world dating back to 2700 BC. Main forms of treatment were dietary therapy to alter the diet of the patient, herbal therapy, acupuncture, a gift of China to the world, and barefooted doctors. Now see, for acupuncture, the doctors who are doing acupuncture, because they believe that there are acupuncture points in your feet, all the points are there in the feet. So they used to go around barefooted. They were not wearing shoes or slippers, so that the points are completely, the pressure is given, acupressure is given. And therefore they were known as barefooted doctors, the ones who were practicing acupuncture. Then breathing exercise, which again we also have, yoga and siddhas, and movement, that is Tai Chi and Qigong. These are the different types of exercises. Like Qi is the, what we say, vital force, the life force. So that is, and Q is the blood. So Q. So Tai Chi means it is a continuous movement of the body, that type of exercise. So that the vital force is, means Qi is stimulated. And these are the Qigong are the movement of a particular organ or a part. Means you do exercise only of the hand or only of the legs. So it is only the parts, because the blood circulates, the blood moves. So these are the important Chinese contribution to the field of medicine. These are the three religions. We have nothing to do with the religions, but these were the famous ones at that time. And the basic thing that they believed were that there are two cosmic forces, the yin and yang. What we say Shiva and Shakti, our concept. So yin was the positive or the feminine element, which is passive. It is a passive element. Feminine is passive. So it is constantly needed to be stimulated. So in disease, more or less, the passive force is to be stimulated. It is to be stimulated. So what we say vital force, they say as yin and yang, the active and the male element. And the balance between these two is health. So according to them, if there is an imbalance of any of these forces, then the disease is caused. So this is the stimulation of the yin force is very important, but imbalance between these two opposing forces can cause disease. So this was their concept. And Chinese medicine believed in 5 elements corresponding to the organs. The 5 elements of nature again. See, all concepts, all civilizations, you will see that the elements are nature. So they all believe that the environment is affecting the man. We are the micro and the environment is the macro. So there is an interrelation between the micro and the macro. Wood with the spleen, fire with liver, earth with heart, metal with lungs, and water with kidney. They believe in 4 methods of examination: observation, hearing, inquiry, and palpation. This is like common in all the different civilizations. Some famous Chinese personalities were, I may be pronouncing their names wrong because I don't know how the exact pronunciation is. So Shen Lang, 2838 to 2698 BC. He was many of them were emperors. The famous personalities were emperors. He was an emperor and was known as the father of medicine. He wrote Chinese Materia Medica, which contained a description of 1,000 drugs. So that was a very big contribution to Materia Medica. Then in Xiao, 255 BC, mythical figure of Chow dynasty. He was said to have done heart transplant. Now this man, he has got very startling stories, unbelievable stories, some of them. It is said that he could look into a person and he could see the heart beating, he could see the liver functioning, so he could see into the person and he could diagnose that what is wrong in that person. Such startling stories are, some of them are very, very fantastic. They are not to be, means you can't believe them. And he had taken out the heart of a dead person and put into a living person. He was taking out the heart of animals and putting into people and making the people live healthy lives. So those are the stories for, I don't know how true they are, but they have written in the literature that he was an unbelievable person and he had such shocking stories associated with him. Then Hong, 2698 to 2598 BC, he was an emperor again. He wrote the book Canon of Medicine, which was highest authority in medicine, but it described imaginary anatomy, physiology, weight of organs and circulation. Again, seemed like Chio that he was not very precise in whatever he was describing. It was more or less imaginary. And Wang Ping, he had described the method of examination and palpation of the pulse. Palpation of the pulse. Now, he had described 12 different types of pulse. Like we have that Nadi, Siddha has that Nadi Vigyan. So, here also in Chinese literature, you find that he had differentiated between 12 different types of pulse. And basically there were three characteristics Chinese method of treatment: acupuncture. Acupuncture is a known science now. They had identified 365 points in the body at that time also, 365 points, and they were using needles made up of silver, gold, brass, or different metals, iron also, and of different length. The shapes and length of different needles was different, and that they were using for acupuncture. So different shapes of needles, and on those 365 points, and it was the people who were following the barefooted doctors. They believed that all diseases have their cure by acupuncture. Moksha, which is mentioned in the introductory part of Organon also, that is application of fire. Moksha is fire, or the burning coals. Now in Chinese medicine, they were using the burnt leaves or the burning leaves, and especially they were using it on the epigastrium. And they believed they were placed, the burning leaves were put on the epigastrium, and they believed that by that the flow of fluid, that is blood, the circulation increases and it becomes good. And when the circulation becomes good, the disease is cured. So that was the concept of moksha, that is using of coal or fire or the burning leaves, or even they were putting the burning leaves on the acupressure points also. The 365 points which were identified, they were putting it on that
On
also.
top of the needle, they put.
Yeah, okay.
It gives a aroma also.
Aroma, and that causes a burn also, and because that burn is caused, and that cures the disease. That is how they believe. It takes away all the negative energy.
Cupping also they do.
Yeah.
Cupping,
So, and massage, of course, it is a very old tradition which is used by Siddha, Ayurveda, as well as the Chinese. The Ming Dynasty, the famous trial of Chinese physician where Sang Kung, he wrote case histories, paralysis and arthritis, cancer. I am late. Ruchi, your time is up. Chang Chun, known as Hippocrates of China, he wrote essay on diet for traditional herb prescribing, which contained more than 100 effective formulas. Huatu, he was the famous surgeon to the king of wheel. He introduced the anesthetic effect by using effervescing power in wine, the effervescing powder of wine. His untimely death abruptly ended the growth of Chinese surgery. Now, how he died? The king of wheel, he remained absent without informing, and so he was killed. He was, because the king of wheel killed him, though he was such a good surgeon, he was killed because he remained absent without informing the king. So the orders were given to kill him. Egyptian medicine, it is, and now I'll go fast, okay?
No, I'm also
It is dating back to 2000 BC, one of the oldest civilization, yet it is better known as they had developed picture writing and papyrus. See, Egyptian, the picture writing, and it was very, very important contribution. Like as I told, they prepared the veggies, but the veggies were not permanent. Some of the tablets which were prepared by dried mud, they got destroyed. But these paintings which they had done, as well as the papyrus. Papyrus is a form of paper. And previously, even Galileo and just because the church was against some of the inventors, they were using papyrus because one of the quality of papyrus is that when you put them in water, then it will dissolve and there will be no traces. So some of the important contributions which were made by such philosophers, they sometimes destroyed it in fear of the church. When the church was after them, then many of the papyrus was destroyed by, especially in the Vatican City. So this is how and Egyptian medicines are preserved till today because of this method of keeping it, and secondly, because of mummification. See, they did mummification because they believed in life after they die. And they said that the soul is immortal and the soul needs everything. So they were doing mummification and they were preparing the entire house for that soul. And in those mummies, when later on these mummies were searched and examined, then how the different fractures were cured, what they had done for doing fractures, the different diseases which were suffered by them, the dissections of the different organs. So many knowledge about the diseases which were prevailing during that time and the medicines which were used during that time, or the methods of treatment which were used, where people were able to know about it because of the Egyptian civilization. Their method of drawing pictures, this papyrus writing, and mummification, which is very useful in the field of medicine. They believed in the immortality of the soul, so mummification was prevalent, which helped in acquiring the knowledge of many diseases like smallpox. See, then it got eradicated, but smallpox, poliomyelitis, bubonic plague, leprosy, etc. Some of the diseases which are eradicated now. This was the pictorial writing which they done on the caves. In Egyptian civilization, the art of medicine was mingled with religion. The physicians were the priests and the sick were brought to the temples. Right? It reached its peak at the time of Imhotep, who was famous as architect and physician of the god of medicine. He was known as the god. His temples were there, and they diagnosed 200 diseases, practiced dentistry, performed surgery, made medicines from plant extract. There was a belief to install a statue in each household to what disease. He was believed to be the god, and so he was worshipped as god. Egyptian concept was that diseases are due to absorption of harmful substances from intestine, which gives rise to putrefaction of blood and formation of pus. Pus was the speech of the heart, which is the modern concept. They studied cosmos forces and concluded that human body was microcosm, a little cosmos made in the form of, see, the environmental concept, which was there in all the sciences, that we are the micro in the environment of macro. Egyptian had sense of hygiene, balanced healthy diet. They used fragrant oils, ointments, cosmetics, herbs. They understood the value of sunlight, fresh air, worship god of health, Horus, deity of children, sacred for god of wisdom. There were eye, head, and doctors. See, specialization came in Egyptian era. That the doctors of eye, head, and tooth. Among the doctors of ancient world, they were the best. As I told that civilization was the best. You just read it because I think I'm taking more time due to self-revision. See, this is what the mummies which were found on the bank of River Nile. Now our Indian medicine, Ayurveda and and Siddha. These are the two important ancient Indian form of medicine. Ayurveda is practiced in entire India. By Siddha you find in Tamil Nadu, in the people, the Agastya Rishi. Because it is said that Siddha, the beginner of Siddha method of treatment was Agastya Rishi, and who was born in Tamil Nadu, and he had his ashram. See, if you see, there are mention of Agastya Rishi. He had taken the whole ocean, he had swallowed it, and Lord Ram, he had given the arrow by which Ravan was killed. So Agastya Rishi is mentioned at many places in our mythological literature, and he was the beginner of the Siddha method of treatment. Ayutu means life, Ayush, that is life, Veda to know or to attain. Ayurveda means knowledge of life or the knowledge by which life can be prolonged. Its origin is traced far back to the Vedic times. It is associated with mythological figures of sages and sages. Many rishis are there, sages are there. The Hindu god of medicine, Dhanvantri, had appeared in Samudra Manthan, and it is believed that one of the Vedas developed as Atharveda, it is said, as developed as Ayurveda. And Dhanvantri, the god of medicine, it is a very famous that among the gods and the demons there was Samudra Manthan, and many things came out, many useful things came out from the Samudra Manthan, except the wish halahal, which was taken by Lord Shiva, and therefore his neck has become purple. And Dhanvantri was the god of medicine, the god of health, who came out from the Samudra Manthan. Even the Amrit came out from there. In 2026 BC, King Ashoka, see, Buddhist kings had promoted Ayurveda a lot in India. After the Mughals invaded India, Ayurveda had a setback. Till the Mughals were not there, Ayurveda was very famous, the only system which was used. King Ashoka promoted Ayurveda and built schools and public hospitals. All Buddhist kings patronized Ayurveda as the state of medicine. The important rishis whose contribution in Ayurveda is Atra Rishi, Charak and Sshmc. Sshmc Rishi is considered to be the surgeon who wrote the Sshmc Samhita, and Charak Rishi was the physician who wrote the Charak Samhita. So these were the famous contributors of Ayurveda. Atra Rishi was a great physician and teacher from Takshashila, the oldest university of India, Takshashila. And during the Buddhist kings, Takshashila was established. His descendant was Purnavasu Atre. Purnavasu, see, some of the medicines in Ayurveda are also known as Purnavasu Vati. So there are many medicines in Ayurveda which are known as Purnavasu. He himself had other 6 disciples who are very important rishis like Grail, Parashar, and medicines. The different Vatis are named after his 6 disciples as well as Purnavasu. So he was a very big contributor in Ayurveda. Then Charak Samhita, which was written by Charak Rishi, he was the most popular king in Ayurveda. He was the 4th physician to Buddhist king Kanishka. He compiled Charak Samhita, which mentioned 500 drugs, one of which was Rawal used for hypertension, same as homeopathy. He was the first to give concept of digestion, metabolism and immunity. He described the 3 doshas or humor, that is bile, phlegm and wind, kapha, pitta and vata. So that is the Ayurvedic concept. Sshmc, he is known as the father of Indian surgery. His magnum opus, Sshmc Samhita, which is complete with knowledge of medicine, pathology, anatomy, ophthalmology, midwifery, hygiene, bedside manner. The early Indian performed amputation, plastic surgery. It is said that Sshmc had performed 14 plastic surgeries on the face. He was expert in 14 different types of plastic surgeries on the human face. Cataract surgery, excised tumors, set fractures, repaired hernias. He was recognized as the father of plastic surgery. But during the Buddhist reign, the Indian surgery suffered a setback due to the doctrine of ahimsa. So ahimsa, because of that, surgery did not develop in Ayurveda. The base of Ayurvedic is 3 dosha, vata, pitta and kapha. Equilibrium of these 3 dosha is health. See our equilibrium of the vital force, there yin and yang, here the 3 dosha. The law of Manu was the code of personal hygiene. Manu was considered the first man, and his law of personal hygiene, where he had described about all the food, the diet and regime which a person should follow. Two methods of treatment, see the similia and chondrilia, both are mentioned, Viprit and the Darkari Chikitsha. Means similar is also mentioned in Ayurveda. It is not only in homeopathy, but it is in Ayurveda also. Atharveda, as I told, the four-way. Atharveda contained 114 hands for treatment of diseases. The two important compilation in Sanskrit of Ayurveda were Charak Samhita and Sushruta Samhita. They are known as the twin pillars of Ayurveda. As we have already mentioned this, anatomy, physiology, etiology and diagnosis. Sushruta Samhita dealt with fundamental of surgery, description and use of more than 100 surgical instruments. These instruments were also described, description of dissection, incision, extracting, bandaging, and also describe anatomy, embryology, toxicology and therapeutics of about 650 drugs. How rich science it is, we can realize. The golden age of Ayurveda was between 800 BC to 600 AD, but Ayurveda suffered a setback after the invasion of Mughals. Presently, its education and training is monitored by National Council for Indian System of Medicine, just like our NCA. There are almost more than 300 institutes governed by NCIM, as well as they have got post-graduation in 16 different branches. Shalakya Kriya, and so different types of. So they have got post-graduation more than homeopathy in 16 different branches. Siddha, it is an ancient. See, Ayush, you must be knowing what are the benefits of Ayurvedic right now, and how it is like among all the systems of Ayush, it is the most favorite as well as the most flourished system of medicine. It is an ancient Indian method of treatment found by Siddhas. Siddhas are again saints. Siddha Purush, what we say, Siddha Purush, who have attained enlightenment. They have started Siddhas, and it is, as I told you, Agastya Rishi was the first Siddha, and after that there were 7 main rishis who had started the Siddha system of medicine. They were yogis, physicians, and skilled scientists. They lived in various parts of India, especially in Tamil Nadu. This system developed with Dravidian culture, which is in the pre-Vedic period. Its literature was written in the form of kajjan leaves, that is coconut leaves, on the coconut leaves or in the form of that coconut leaves, in Tamil language, and systematically codified into various subjects like embryology, pediatric, ophthalmology, gynecology, geriatrics, etc. According to the Siddha, the universe consists of 5 basic elements, which corresponds to 5 senses of human body. This is their base. All sciences have different bases. Earth, skin to touch, water, tongue to taste, fire, eye to see, air, nose to smell, ether, ear to hear. So this is their concept. Siddhas use mainly metals, minerals, especially mercury, and some animal products as medicine. Like Ayurveda, they too believed in 3 dosha like Vata, Pitta and Kapha. It believed in the concept of Shiva, male, yin and yang, same way, male, and Shakti, female, the 2 essential entities of matter and energy. Same our concept, matter and energy, that is the physical body is nothing without the vital force. The vital force is needs the physical body to express itself. They use Nadi Vignan. See Nadi Vignan. From the pulse, they can make out what is the disease and what treatment they have to take. Just to mention, there are some of the experts of Nadi Vignan which I have heard about from some of the IIM professors. Indian Institute of Management and other professors have given this case history that they are experts in diagnosing the disease with this Nadi Vignan. Not only that because they Ayurvedic Siddha, they give lots of things not to eat, that they should not eat curd in the evening, or this must not be eaten. So different things which they don't have to eat. Now even if you have eaten it on the previous evening from the Nadi, they can say that you have eaten this food, or you have taken ambli, or you have taken curd, or something khatta you have taken. Like So this is what the case study which was presented in IIM Ahmedabad, where they had presented a case study on Nadi Vigyan. So this is a science which very few know, and the unfortunate part of it is that they are not teaching this science to others. It is slowly dying with the people who know about it. Maybe in Tamil Nadu, more people must be knowing about it, but in Gujarat there are very few, and the ones who know about it, they are not giving that knowledge to the others, and that is the very unfortunate part of it. So, as one of the method of diagnosis and prognosis of disease, they developed a discipline called Kayakal, Fountain of Youth or Longevity, Freedom from Illness. Kayakal, they have got methods for it, and they are using one tablet of Mapu. Mapu is some mercurial preparation, Mapu they call it, and that tablet is used for longevity of life. It helps you in remaining young, and it can be used for longevity of life. So Mapu is one of their famous tablets. Gold and mercury are administered. See, this is what I was saying, mercury is used. Important and useful motto is, the less one eats, the healthier he can remain. This is very true. The less you eat, you remain healthy. Presently, the Central Council of Research in one of the system of Ayush, and so it has got a council also, and it has got a national institute. Like all Ayush systems have got national institutes. In the same way, Siddha also has got a national institute. Then another Indian system is Unani. It is not only Indian, it is more Persian and Urdu based. Unani originated in Greece and was further enriched by Arabs and Persians. Its most renowned scholar was Ibn Sina, a physician, philosopher, scientist, statesman and poet. This was the beginner he had started, and as I told you, that the Unani went to the Roman and the Greek literature, and they developed their system. These are the eminent contributors. Hakim Ajmal Khan, he produced Unani drugs from, again, the same what is in homeopathy. Hakim Kaburuddin Sahib, he translated all Unani classics from Arabic to Urdu. And so, because of that, Unani became famous, because it was translated in Urdu, so it was widely used. And Hakim Abdul Razak, he established Central Council of Research in Unani in 1969. These are the theories again of four humor. These are they call it Dam, Balgam, Sofra and Sauda. And the pulse is known as imbalance causes disease, nerves, bowels, baras and mera. These are the words which are used in the Unani system of medicine. The medicines are mainly herbs, sometimes includes minerals, animals and marine drugs. They are prepared in decoction, syrups and liqueurs. They, more or less, they are in syrups. They are given in the form of syrups or herbs. They call it herbs. Presently, there are 50 recognized College of Unani Medicine. National Institute at Bangalore has gained fame in development and research in treatment of leukoderma. Finally, 20th and 21st century, I am not describing it because we are living in those centuries, are the golden ages of medicine with commendable advancement like laser, robotics and remote surgery. Recently, a cardiologist in Ahmedabad had conducted a remote surgery, not recently, before COVID. He had a bypass surgery, he had conducted in a remote way. Ultrasound, imaging, 3D printing, laparoscopy, IVF, stem cell therapy, cancer immunology, AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, telemedicine, CAT scanning, tissue engineering, grafting, implants, organ transplants, and many, many more to name. So this is all about the recent century, and happy healing to all of you. Thank you. Okay, so now I need that. Okay. of me now. No questions.
Today we clear to
Also, there was history companies.
No questions now.
Very nice.
Very nice.
अभी तक जो कॉन्सेप्ट में हिस्ट्री ऑफ मेडिसिन बोली है
Very interesting now.
That is what Dr. Meeru told me, that nobody is ready to take this topic because I also told the same thing, and in the beginning only I told that I avoid teaching this, but now I feel I'll teach it.
Any reference
Next week I am planning to teach it to the second year students.
Any new reference book we had?
न्यू बुक्स
I have things I had written, different books of community. More I got from community.
So with Farooq Master Mubadil, Farooq Mubadil, Man and Medicine.
There are so many different books, but see, the basic concept you have to take up and it was really helpful. This topic is so easy. The second half I will just rush.
and I can change it.